Friends, we are about to continue the interesting and colourful, may I say, life of our friend Jenny Smith. So if we would like to sit back and Jenny, when you're ready, please continue.
Thank you. I have, as I said to some of you who were there before, I have the diaries for these years, and it's chock-a-block of me going to meetings all over the country. Albrecht Turk came down to Bristol. He was the chief admin for Quaker's race relations, and he visited Bristol. I took him to the Ink Works, the Advice Centre, introduced him to lots of initiatives in the communities, Hawley Road and others, and also the university settlement project. John Sullivan was actually then for WA working in Hawley Road. So I was trying to give him a picture of the eastern St Werburghs, St Paul's and the inner city areas of the city, so that he has some idea what was there. Unbeknown to me, he went off and talked to CRE, and he asked, what would you like in Bristol? What was the one thing you're missing? And they said, an English as a second language scheme. There isn't one. There was a class at Hawley Road, but it was only used by the people from the same communities. About then, and I'm not sure about this, and I've heard another friend in Bristol talk about this meeting, I went also to Woodbrook for a weekend session. And at that session, we were talking about the various ethnic communities in our cities. And I said, and others agreed, that, are you hearing me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. And others agreed, I'll come forward, that they were tinderboxes. And I was saying, you're going to have riots if you're not careful. And other Quakers were saying, well, we have a quiet word with the chief constable. We were saying, we think it's too late. You're going to get it, whether you like it or not. They feel alienated. They feel not wanted here. And yet they are used in employment and other jobs that the white community wouldn't do. Anyway, I thought I'd say that because I think that meeting at Woodbrook was really important, that the community relations section of Quakers actually picked the message up from that room and realised that there might be problems going to come out in inner cities throughout the country. As I said, I've got all these diaries. I was bringing up 4 children. I was attending PTA meetings, but at the same time, I was on the management committee of the St Paul's Advice Centre. And I was getting to know loads of community leaders, people like Olive Osborne, who was doing absolutely stalwart work just off Sussex Place. People you never hear about today. And I notice when people do talk about people working from the Black community, they talk about men. And it was the women that were holding a lot of it together. Women had to, for the sake of the children, for the sake of the families. And I think we ought to make absolutely sure that the names like people of Olive, like Olive, are actually picked up in the history books of the future. I was attending lectures through the Bristol Council of Voluntary Service. I was particularly interested in mental health because I had one of the people they'd given me to help had mental health issues. And all this, I just chatted all the time to Albert when he was with me, and he went off to talk to other people in the community. I was also, as I told you, an active Samaritan. I noticed the diaries are full of the word Sam. That meant, and I know I did one on Christmas Day. I walked all the way into the city just to do that. I also attended lectures, and I would go wherever I could to make myself a bit more wise about what the modern thinking was and whether it was relevant to today's society.
Jenny,
Yes,
could I interrupt and ask what that word "some" is? I
Sam.
misheard.
It's a short form for Samaritans, and it's appearing all the time in my diaries, which means I was constantly attending and being a Samaritan. And we're not supposed to talk about that, but I actually held a man's hand while he was stomach pumped when he had taken an overdose in the BRI and things like that. I was hardening myself up and opening myself to whether I had the ability to do things which other people usually avoid. But that's another thing. And yes, I heard a lecture from Dr. Kethin Morgan from mental health in Bristol, and that's written down. Also got to know the Jewish Rabbi Model, and some of the Jewish community, and realised that they had two mosques, one at the top of Park Street that everyone knows, and another one hidden away in Easton, which is more radical. As I've got older, I've met lots of them now, and a lot of my friends are from the Jewish community still, although I don't actually like what some of them are doing in Palestine. And I went to Labour Party meetings as well, like Baroness Gateskill talking about abortion at the meeting house in Euston Road in London. I've got a friend with Annie Perry, and I'd love to know what happened to Annie Perry. Oh, you know, Marie. Good. Afterwards, tell me what happened to her, because she and I got on like a house on fire. She had a young son, I had 4 children, and we did things sometimes and went places. And a friend that I miss, and I hope she's all right. Another friend was Vivian Bath. She stood as a Labour councillor in Stockwood and got elected, and she was a teacher at Brislington School. So I was making friends as well, because by making friends, you're picking up things that are going on in other parts of the community. You talk to each other. I also went on to the board of the PTA for Brislington School to keep an eye on the school that my children were attending. If you remember, education was the one key I thought was going to get them into a better world when they grew up. And I became an active member of the Bristol Labour Women's Council. And the regional organiser was Vera Cox. Nobody ever talks about Vera Cox now, and she was wonderful to some of us women. If you have an older woman to talk to about what's going on, it makes a lot of difference. And I listened to John Adams talking about getting a new Land Act, where we actually sorted out who owned all the land and what it was being used for, and whether it was for the benefit of the rest of the community or for the few. So there was radicalism going through as well. I took my children, as I said to you before, out with the Bristol Ramblers. We went right the way through Devon, Wiltshire on trips. It was amazing. And it did my children good because they were walking with intelligent people. They didn't have to walk with mum. They were listening to all sorts of conversations and being shown wildlife and being educated in a relaxed way. And I attended Peace Pledge Union meetings. and Labour Party conferences. Yes, I got involved with the Stockwood Community Association, and because of me being a PTA member at Brislington School, I was really concerned because the children had to go down a really narrow lane to get to school. So I lobbied, and Gwen Barrow was the Avon County Councillor at the time. I went with a petition. I wouldn't come out of a road in Stockwood until I had 2/3 of the people who signed up in the houses, and gave her this petition. And Stockwood, from Stockwood Road through to Brislington School, now has a footpath across the fields for the children where there is no traffic. Silly things like that, but they matter. And I enrolled my children in various clubs at the same time. St John's Ambulance, Scouts. Found out recently, my daughter admitted that I gave her the money to attend John Ambulance meetings, and she'd actually used it to go off to do art classes at South Bristol Tech. So you never know what your children are up to behind your back. She went to Camberwell College of Art eventually, so you can't keep an artist away from what they really want to do. My husband came out of the forces at the end of 1976, and he couldn't get a job. He went for interview after interview. I know he went to one to Avon County Council, and the man there said, "I'm not having you, you take my job. You've got more qualifications than I have." I thought that's strange, actually admitting it. But he did get onto a course, a government course at Bristol Polytechnic that was then. So he had a government grant coming in, and as his pension wasn't enough to keep a family of 6, we really needed the money. And I went and signed on with the TOPS retraining course, and did shorthand and typing, and I could do 90 words a minute, and I'm a touch typist. And I got another A pass at Economic and Public Affairs. You're not surprised, are you? And I was supposed to go off and become a secretary, which didn't actually happen, did it? Didn't happen. There were lots of dirty tricks in the Labour Party. I could write a book on what happened there. We had to restrain one of the councillors that was held up as an example of wonderful from strangling a militant at one of the meetings. And I and Peter Hammond know the name of that councillor, but I think it better be buried. But they were, because people politically wanted to put their thoughts forward, they do go over the top occasionally and have to be calmed down. So I was learning about a different, because I was only on the edges originally. And the children my children attended summer schools. I know Penny went off to one in Reading and came back. And Penny came back from Minehead and said, "I'm a vegetarian, I'm never going to touch meat again." So we had a vegetarian in the family. My husband was not very pleased. He thought she'd get over it. She's a vegetarian to this day. So my children were making their own minds up. And I think that's the way you bring children up. You give them the base stones, and then they decide themselves what they're going to do. She was involved with militant for a while, and she came out of that because she said the men were sexist. And she encouraged all the other women to leave at the same time. So they suddenly had only men in their organisation, which I think gave them a very definite message. And she went off on her own world, Penny, which was good because she ended up at Camberwell in London. I used to go to Jessie Stevens's house. She was a suffragette, a stalwart of the independent women and women's rights. and that was down in the Chessels. Another person you never hear people talk about much. I went to Devon and someone mentioned her, and they were amazed that I'd gone to her house and actually talked to her, and I had. But after I'd done the course, I was interviewed by the Department of Employment at the PIFE at the end of the course, who were very pleased that I got lots and lots of qualifications. They asked what I was going to do, and I said, I don't know, but I want to be a social worker, and the skills you've given me could actually be useful in typing up reports and all the rest of it. So I wasn't quite ending up where they thought I should go. Oh, by the way, but every time I went on any of these courses, because I didn't have any money for the books and things, I would go and get a 6-week job somewhere. And the 6-week job, I did a bond organisation in Northcliffe House on one of the top floors where rich people were putting their money into bonds and getting interest. I and another student were there for the 6 weeks so the rest of the staff could have holidays, which meant I was honing up my maths and getting it. And then I went on, another time I worked at Lancing in Bagnall, which is the forklift place. And I only did a throwaway comment on something that happened to one of the staff, and he went and joined the union. So I must have said something that was very relevant to his life because I didn't think it was in depth. Oh, I helped with the Young Friends group at Wick Court. Wick Court, we had sleepovers for weekends, and they helped with the garden and did all sorts of things there. Most of the time I just took the children out or came out for the day to help, but they were independent, and it was a very old Elizabethan mansion house at Wick on the edge of Bristol. I don't know what it does now, but it was taken over by a group from Hartcliffe eventually. I assume it's still there. And one of the other things I did on one of my 6 weeks August things was go and work for shelter. And I was helping Hilary Gilmore, who she picked up 24 evictions that the city council were going to carry out. They told the people in July that they were going to evict them, and this was all going to come up in the September meeting. So I helped her go to see one of the Sackhoff sisters. There were 3 sisters. Britain was one of them, that the Jewish families they came from. And we went and lobbied her, and we managed to stop 4 of the evictions. One that we stopped was a man that owed £4.06. So you see that I was also trying to find out what other voluntary groups were doing in the city. So now I can come to the English as a second language thing. As I said, Albrecht came to Bristol in 1977. The money came from friends, a friend that had died in Somerset. And the funding wasn't very much, and they thought it was going to be able to last for 1 year only. So whatever we did, it had to be for 1 year. By that time, Carmen Beckford, CRO for Bristol, had said that what they really liked was a language scheme set up in the city. And Albrecht made absolutely sure that I met up with people running language schemes from all over the country. So the first thing I had to do was travel. I have somewhere, I think on here, a list of where I went to, because I went to a lot of places. No, perhaps, oh, yes, I met with the Bridget Beaches in Birmingham to see what Birmingham was doing. I know I went up to Lancashire. I know I also got embedded in London. in various parts of the south and the east parts of London where immigrant communities were living. And wherever I could, I got hold of materials so that we were looking at what sort of material they were using and what sort of techniques they were using to run language scheme. Yes, also I was talking to Rashid Hamid from Birmingham. What happened during that time, which nobody knows but we did, I actually lost another baby, which was a bit of a wobbler going through, but I picked myself up and went back to doing what I was being paid to do. I started also myself attending Urdu classes so that I could say things like Apkanam Kahe and my name's Jenny Smith Hay, so that I was starting to talk to people in their own language, at least in Urdu, although I soon found out that many of the others spoke in different dialects, in different languages, and that wasn't helpful for everybody. But it was an effort. At least also I was seeing how difficult it was to try to learn a language. And it is difficult to. Oh yeah, I've found the list. I went to Scarborough, Brighton, and all sorts of other places as well to see what they were doing. We had an office, and it was in the old Methodist Hall off of Old Market. And I had a nice young girl, oh, Marcia Lewis. There you are. Names sometimes don't come as fast as they used to in the old days. Marcia was West Indian, and she was there to answer the phone, to help us with the paperwork, to help collate what we had got and think about what we might have to get, but we couldn't afford to buy much teaching material. Also, I had to go on Radio Bristol, in the papers, we had flyers, we were encouraging, because Hawley Road had one class, they got a bit uppity about anyone else setting up a language scheme. So we had to make it, we decided it was diplomatic, to make it home tuition. So we were asking for volunteers to go into Asian homes to teach them English as a second language, to go out with them to go shopping, to go with them to the hospital to try and help them, to go with them to the school to talk about their children, to be their person that was trying to help them understand everything that was going on. And we got lots of people come forward. It was absolutely amazing. And the churches, the churches in Bristol all joined in. It wasn't just Quakers, it was right across the board. And I met a great many of the people that were doing all sorts of brilliant things in the city. It wasn't just the inner cities that were getting changes going through. New initiatives were taking place right across the city. I think it was new thinking coming in and a new purpose of let's change the world for a better world. Sadly, I think they failed, but we did our best. Yes, I went to the Friends International Centre. I always remember that. That was while I was up there on a course, and I had this debate with somebody from Africa who believed that the only way to get control of their governments was violence. I remember sitting there with a drink in the evening, actually trying to convince him there were other ways of changing the world than using violence. It's really funny. You wonder whether God plants us in places like that, because how else would you have a conversation about it? But I don't know whether what I said worked, but at least tried to make him think that you got constructive stones to build their new economy on and everything else if you didn't actually smash it all to pieces. Actually, we were supposed to only run the organisation for one year, and the establishment weren't listening in any way. Did I tell you who was the management committee? I'm looking for the paperwork, sorry about that. Well, Fred Morehouse was one, and Theodore Bacon was the other. And they were absolutely wonderful and supportive of helping to get the language scheme on. But I think they were doing other things behind the scenes. Although I was being interviewed by radio and press and everybody else, we really weren't getting anywhere. And eventually we decided there had to be a petition in the following July. So a petition was got, and I took it to Ashton Gate Festival, and it grew and it grew and it grew and it came in, and we took it to the first Avon County Council meeting the following year and presented it to the meeting, whereby some of the councillors are saying we want to hear more about this scheme and we can't talk to them because the rules don't allow us to talk to this group. But would you, shall we suspend our meeting? We have a chat and then we recommence our meeting and go on with the business that we've got to do. And that's what happened. It made history on Avon. So we talked to the councillors, told them the need that was in the city, explained that what we have been doing, and the meeting decided, I don't think it was that meeting, I think it was the following one. I know that I was interviewed by Radio Bristol outside Avon House at that time, but they decided they were taking it in to further education, and which was the unit in Monks Park Road. But they couldn't take it in straight away because they hadn't got the facilities. So I started, I wondered if there was so much more going on, you know. There were some wonderful people around, and I often think my diaries are full of their names. And I think people ought to know how many people added and helped and did things in the background. I know I got great respect for Theodore and for, yeah, see, I'm old, my mind goes blank. But we don't talk about what Quakers do we sometimes? They're just working away and quietly in the background, trying to change the world for a better world. And then we meet at Quaker meetings and it's lovely, but we don't actually say, how are you and are you all right? And sometimes there is a need for you to share that if you're struggling. I've always wondered about that.
Wasn't Mike involved at some stage? Jenny?
I'm afraid I can't remember that, and I haven't seen this. I think he was in a way, but I don't know. I think it was contacting with organisations. What did happen was various friends actually did it personally themselves. When they got the flyers and things, they went out and talked to people all over the city. Bath wanted to start their own organisation from what we did. It started to ricochet over our borders to other areas. So it grew, but I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Mike and I were both involved at Hawley Road. And right. I remember sort of people saying something like, oh, you know, we don't need another scheme, do we? And I said, yes, we do. Because we was really a literacy scheme, but then all these people started coming with wanting English as a second language, and we did our best, but we knew that there was a huge need out there, and so when other people were saying, "Oh no, we don't need anything more, do we?" I said, "Yes, yes, we do. This is absolutely vital."
Right.
And wasn't the folk house involved as well?
The folk house was, yes.
Yeah.
What the plan was, he started classes up there, and then a class formed and went private from there. It was like it was growing. I did have, yeah, I am getting older. My mind goes sometimes. I'm sorry about this. There were all sorts of other things that were growing from this that I don't think other people realised. Yeah, no, I know Hawley Road felt very protective about what they were doing, and we had to ignore them, I'm afraid, because we felt that the need was greater. We started classes, the YMCA started opening their doors on Tusserdown, and they were reaching out to people. I think there was a class up in Redland somewhere that somebody started. In other words, initiatives were going on among various other communities. We also founded the NATESLA, National Association for Teaching English as a Second Language. I went up to Scarborough for the AGM, first AGM. We were coming from all over the country because not only Bristol, somehow or other, it was like we'd lit a fire that others were lighting in their own communities right the way across England and Wales and everywhere else. I went straight on to the committee for NATESLA. Our second conference we held in Brighton, and our third, which I had to put together, was after I'd stopped working for Quakers, but was at the hotel up by the university in Bristol. And we had language people coming from all over the country for training, for sharing knowledge and getting them all into the same room so that it became an entity in itself. NATESLA's changed its name. I don't know what it's called now, but it still exists. And they've changed some of the techniques. And I remember afterwards going for an evening meal with the language scheme that was founded in the education. And this was surrounded by women sitting at this table. And I said, "You must remember, if I hadn't done what I'd done, you wouldn't all have jobs." And it was lovely to see them all there. It had worked, and it worked a lot more. And we found some of the people that were attending university from abroad were taking the message back to their own communities, that you have people living among you that can't speak English or their own language, our language, and we got to get classes out there for them. Now, there were other ricochets off of this. Well, first of all, I discovered that there were really bad things going on in the mosque in Easton. So I took someone aside and said, "I think this is what's happening. It's sexually dangerous for some of the young girls." And about 2 years afterwards, that was sorted out. But it did take time for people to actually work out what was really happening there. And we got a really nice person take over there, which was what was wanted. But I was also involved with the church at Totterdown, which was bought for a mosque. And I went in and helped giving advice of where and how they could go for planning permission to go and get the minaret put on top and it to be turned into a mosque. And I attended the first inaugural meeting of the mosque, sitting among the women at the back. And I don't recommend it for knees. Sitting in cross knees is not comfortable when you're a Western person. But it meant that I got to know all sorts of people in the Totterdown area. And as I said, the YWCA had their class next door to it. Now, the other thing I did was don't know how the conversation ever arose, but somebody in London said, when they found out we were getting mosques growing up in Bristol, you'll never get a Hindu temple, Jenny. So I said, oh yes, we will. And I think it was five shillings, I bet, that we would get one. We would have to pay. So I started to work with Mr. Joshi and Mr. Sannyasi. Mr. Joshi worked for BA Aircrafts, and Mr. Sannyasi, and the name Sannyasi means holy man, by the way. So I started to talk to them, and they wanted to have a Hindu temple, and they were having problems. Oh, I also was made an honorary member of the Asian Women's Organization. And without knowing it, I put my foot in it. And then the Barots, who were lecturers at the university, came and congratulated me. And my foot that I put in, I'd pointed out that whoever was the chair, vice chair, the secretary, or treasurer of an organisation was actually the servants of the people of that organisation. And that's all I'd said. However, the whole of the organisation had been run by high caste Hindu women. And suddenly the organisation split, and we had two organisations running themselves. And I thought, I didn't actually mean to do that, but it happened. And both, I think, are still running at the moment, somewhere in the city, which is good. But I was hoping the message has actually gone that you shouldn't have high class to anybody, that we're all working together in this world, but that hadn't seemed to come through. I had gone to the Sikh temple in Easton, but I did that before I became language organizer, and the Quakers did that. The Quakers took a group of us to the Sikh temple to actually sit there and during their service, and it seemed to take hours and have some lovely food, but yeah. So I was getting around other churches, which meant I had to start reading, didn't I? And you will find on my bookcase all sorts of books about various religions. And as the advantage was that I'd been in Cyprus and actually looked at the Muslim religion. And the more I think about that, it's such a shame that all these religions trying to get to the same place are all vying and shoving around each other, and not, it's the message that counts, and the things that we should do with our lives and the peace and everything else. So that's sad. I'm not sure about the Tesla Southwest. What else have we got? I've got yeah. My book is full, my diaries are full of names and addresses. Every nationality you could think of. I found out things about what was going on. The Bangladeshis didn't talk to the people that were coming from Africa, despite the fact that they were all in the same religion. And the divisions that were going on weren't helpful really to the communities as a whole. I still think there's a lot of work to do to try to get people to accept each other for what we are rather than for what they would like to make you into. And I think that the language scheme basically did its best. Once it was handed over to Avon County Council, it became part of the academic world. And I assume that they gave them bits of paper to say that they were literate. I know it helped. One of the things that we'd come across was the fact that in hospital, women were having to give birth to children with no one understanding what they were saying. And it was essential to get interpreters in. And I drew up a list of interpreters which 10 years later I went into CRE and saw was still on the lit wall, and thought, hasn't anyone updated that? And perhaps it's a job we ought to ask someone to do today, is to get a up-to-date list of interpreters. But at least there was a poor Sikh kid that's father did terrible things in Eastern, and the boy had to be the interpreter for the father's case when he'd murdered someone. And that was not right. And situations, I hope, do not happen like that today. So there were good things that came out of it. I became extremely aware of the differences in the communities. And I think without Quakers, we wouldn't have perhaps reached across so soon to other communities, which was what was needed in that way as well. Nothing is perfect, lots to do still, but there you are. I think that's the end as far as I'm concerned. I'll probably remember something I should have said later.
Well, thank you, Jenny. That was, as usual, engaging and extremely interesting. About what Quakers would say, a life well lived. So if anybody has any questions or comments for Jenny, I know earlier you asked about someone and Marion said she knew this person. So if Marion would like to make a few comments on that, I'm sure Jenny would be appreciative.
Yeah. She had a son.
Oh, Annie Perry.
Yeah.
She's alive and well and lives in Mansfield.
Right.
And I have her contact details if you want to get in contact with her.
Yes, please.
So I'm not sure if I have your email address. I might have it from Weekly Committee, but if you could give it to me, then I'll do that.
Right. It's Jenny with a Y.
Yeah.
M Smith 12 at virginmedia.com.
Right. And I don't know where you last were in contact with her, but eventually she and Arthur Peacock got married at Redland, and then they went off to be wardens at Mansfield Quaker Meeting House. And they did that for many years until I think there was the clerk of Mansfield Meeting or somebody brought in all sorts of things that don't sound a bit Quaker, sort of evangelical religion type things, and they felt they couldn't stay being wardens, and so they left being wardens, but they still live in Mansfield. Generally speaking, Annie is involved in quite a lot of community things. And Arthur is busy reading and writing music.
Yeah.
And Rupert, I think he had a slightly checkered career of one sort or another, but he also lives in Mansfield. I think he's had several relationships. I'm not sure if he has any children, but when I last talked to Annie about it, I think he was either working at or managing a bike mending shop, but I don't know what he's doing now. But obviously Annie would tell you all about it.
Yeah.
But he must be, oh, he must probably be in his 50s by now, I would think.
Right.
So
No, I have remembered something. It was not a nice something, but I went on running the classes for training tutors until Avon got their act together. And the very last session, I was absolutely appalling on. And the reason I was appalling is I'd come away from home and I was in the kitchen. My daughter walked in and she said, there's a fight going on out in the road. And then this boy appeared at our kitchen door and tried to take my carving knife out into the road to kill the other boy that was out in the road. And I stood there and stopped it. And I wasn't very good at my last lesson. One of the tutors said, "You weren't very good. What's the matter?" And that's what was the matter with me in the last session. I'd just come away from getting a knife away from someone at home and getting my kids out of the house so that they weren't going to see their mother killed.
The other thing I wanted to kind of clear up slightly was the things about Hawley Road, because there was more than one thing going on, and it was actually a bit embarrassing because one of the main things going on there, apart from the stuff that Mike and I were doing, was that Eleanor Brunton had for years run a very successful sewing cum English class with the redoubtable Mrs. Mukraj, who was a force to be reckoned with. She was Hindu, and she'd had to leave East Africa, and she was an artist as well. She later joined a group that I ran at the Asian Day Centre, and did the most beautiful work, which I've still got some slides of. But she and Eleanor had run this class for years and years and years. It was just for a small group of Indian women, and they thought they had kind of was supplying all the need that there was. Now, Mike and I knew differently, because the evening class that we were doing, which has started off being adult, it started off being maths. Actually, I got involved originally doing numeracy, but that soon spread to English. Literacy, mainly for people from the Caribbean. And then people started coming to us for English language. And so we knew there was a whole need out there. Now, both these groups met at Hawley Road. So it was, the opposition was from Eleanor and her group. And I remember at one point, she sort of turned to me and said, "Oh, you will support me and say that, you know, there's no need for this other thing." And I said, "Well, I'm afraid I won't, because I think there's a load of other need, and I think it can't come soon enough." So, and it was a bit embarrassing, because there we were, both Quakers, but having sort of quite different views about the subject. And I think we were sort of very relieved when there was a proper scheme available, because, you know, we were just, you know, a group of volunteers sort of struggling away. I mean, I had started off doing maths, which was then, you know, my expertise, and then I'd managed to get on board a wonderful junior school teacher called Carol Thorne, whom you might remember. And she as well as teaching all day, she was a peripatetic teacher for kids who'd arrived from overseas, and she came, and we ran the scheme together. But then when the tide of people needing English as a second language came along, I don't think either of us was particularly equipped for that. You know, I was good on the maths, she was good on the reading, and we did our best with the English language. But we could see that, you know, this was going to you know, there was a huge need that we couldn't ever meet on a kind of a Monday evening for all comers. So, you know, we were kind of right behind all your efforts to get something else going.
Can I say that Mrs. Mukraj was feared by many in the Asian community, many of the women?
Absolutely.
I don't know why. It was something to do with Shiva, who was the god she supported in the Hindus. And I know that even Mr. Joshi, Mr. Sannyasi, used to distance themselves from her. Oh, by the way, I went to the opening of the Hindu temple in St. George, and on the invitation that's now posted in the museum, you will find my name badly spelt with the right address. But yeah, and I took my son. It was an invitation, so I took my son, because my husband wasn't at all interested in anything I did like that. But there was undercurrents running, And I must have touched them when I was in with the Asian women's group, somewhere or other. I actually pointed, maybe it was me, making them think about high caste women, telling low caste women what to do and vice versa, you know, there's something. I did ask Albrecht Turk about Hawley Road. I rang him. I've got a note in the diary saying I rang about Hawley Road to Albrecht and said, what do I do about this?
You were saying earlier about children translating for their parents.
Right.
A friend of mine who worked as a psychiatric nurse said the most heart-rending time she had was when a mother was admitted into a psychiatric unit and the son had to interpret for the mother about what her emotional state was at the time. And I thought, I don't think any child should be put in that position to have to do that. But Karen said it was kind of late at night on a Friday, and there was no kind of, they couldn't get a translator to come there at that time, you know. And so this poor child was put in a position of having to ask his mother quite intimate details, you know, which I thought, I wouldn't like that to happen these days, you know.
I still feel I'm a bit of an amateur in the world. It comes out and bites you occasionally. I don't know about that.
Yeah. Any other questions, friends? Or comments? Or
I tell you what, be careful when you ask for a cup of tea, because the Bangladeshi family gave me salt in it, and somebody else put spices in it. You never quite knew what sort of cup of tea you were going to get out of anyone.
just as going round to, I used to have to look after an occasional child during if they weren't at the school which I was working at. You know, when I got my senior position, I had to go around and visit children in the holiday period. And a very senior lady social worker who I was going around with at the time said there are a number of rules you have to follow if you want to get round in time. Don't accept cups of tea, because if you do, you'll be wanting to go to the loo at some time, and you're never quite sure of what the loos are like in these houses. Don't sit down, because in some of the houses, the furniture was of dubious quality, and you don't know who had been sitting on it before, type of thing, you know. And from an innocent person like myself, these were invaluable questions, you know. And I'm sure that when you were involved in social work yourself, you know, there was many a story you could have told, but you thought, really, I can't say anything about that.
I have stories when working for shelter. I just inspected the house standing out on the road, and a woman and a man that was the householder was bartering with someone for how much to him to have sex with her. And I said, I am about inspecting this house. You can do that later. No. Yeah, there's some lovely people around. By the way, I broke all those rules. I sat down on their settee. I had cups of tea. I, you know, talked to them about things the best I could, broken English, and with the children there. Yes, no, I've been in lots and lots. I worried about the lack of warmth sometimes in their houses. they couldn't afford to turn the heating on, and you knew that. So I realised lots of them were on very low income, struggling, and lots of those that were coming out of where was it, in Africa, Amin's area, they actually,
Uganda.
yes, they ended up in mentally ill, because I also helped for a short time in the Royal Hospital and with the trolley when I first came to Bristol, and a lot of them were in the mental health section having help because they'd lost everything. And the instability of going to a new country they didn't understand. I think God worked in a very strange way with me, threw me in the deep end, and I learned things not from the exercise book, but from reality.
Now, I'm going to be slightly bold here and not and verge from my script. And when I say I'm going to be bold, Marion, is there any chance that you could perhaps chat to us at some Friday on your interesting life also?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I guess so. Yeah, okay.
Good.
That would be admirable, because I'm sure Patsy and I have the duty of looking for people to actually do these Friday sessions, and I'm sure Patsy would agree that you would be a very interesting speaker.
Okay, what is there a particular format?
I will give you, shall I give you an email, Maria? Will that be all right?
Yeah, okay.
And, you can arrange a date then. That would be really great. I'm sure we'd all enjoy that. Thank you.
I'm assuming there's no real format.
Oh yes, I didn't like to say that. I was trying to cover up. No. Hattie is one of our speakers later this month, so. I do think actually we must have many other people, you know, within the Friends who would like to come and talk, and it would certainly be good to hear them. So do pass the message along the line, everybody. You know, if you've got a friend who you think might be prepared to give a short talk and answer some questions, if you could either ask them if it's okay for me to have their email, or get them to email me, that would be really wonderful. It's quite hard work putting together a programme for each month, and each month so far I've been absolutely delighted at the consequences, but it's still a worry whether I'll be able to get 4 people together the following month. We're also not sure what we're going to be doing over the summer, but for the next couple of months we'll be doing something.
You always put it in the area meeting newsletter.
Yes, yeah. It normally goes in there, but now and again I'm afraid I miss the date.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure Jenny's example is quite exceptional, but then I'm also equally sure that you know, we're just scratching the surface of cultural history here. There's you know, if you it's like YouTube. There's you know, endless film. Once you start opening the surface for everybody to participate, and it stops being just the media projecting stuff out, you discover that there are endless stories, and so much that people have learned and have to share, so much wisdom in our cultures. It's wonderful.
I think it's a shame Margaret and Peter Hodgson have gone, because I know bits of theirs. She was absolutely amazing, Margaret, and Peter was too.
Yes, you also mentioned in passing Eleanor Brunton, who I knew from Redland Meeting, but I just found her and her husband quite an amazing couple, you know, who who no doubt had a full and interesting life.
Mm.
Anyway, friends, any more comments or questions or such?
Could I just ask, I've got your lists of things, Lorraine Priest doing a life in crime. Do you know what sort of angle that's going to be?
I don't think she is a past criminal. I think it's more of her work in the justice system. Yeah, but I don't know any more details than that. Sorry. I haven't got my list in front of me. Is that next time? No, I think isn't it Chris next time?
Yeah.
No. Okay. I hardly ever remember to open the list before I zoom in, and I'm too stupid to know how to access my list and leave the Zoom up. But I'll get there in the end.
We'll all be professional social historians and we'll have all the tech stuff sorted out at some point in the future. We're all learning. It's great.
Well, I would say now that this is the virtual sign, David, that the cutoff point.
Right.
So if no one has anything, and the as that phrase goes, the witching hour has become. So if I can ask our friend Christopher to do the necessary.
You're muted.
Right. Goodbye, everybody, then. And thank you very much, Jenny. And
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.